Hey y'all, hope you're doing well. My name is Dave. I'm a senior in the class of 2021 at Walter Johnson High School in North Bethesda, Maryland. And this is the start of a video series, which is a school project for my senior year, but it's a lot more than that. And so the goal here is for me to give you and other young activists like myself a very cohesive resource where you can find a lot of information about the government of Montgomery County and of Maryland because I've always found that information very hard to access and I knew very little about it. And so I'm hoping to get it pushed out to you, and I'm hoping to get your schools to teach it to you eventually. And so I wanted to start by putting things in context. And so I'm going to show you a bunch of maps. I made a lot of them. I stole a few of them with credit, but stolen off the internet. And so we're going to take a look at, who the people are in Montgomery County, Maryland, where they live, what do they look like? How much money are they making? So forth and so on. So starting Montgomery County. So here's a map of the county. And so obviously we start with DC down here. And then a lot of the county revolves around this I-270, Interstate 270 corridor. So we start down here with Bethesda and Chevy Chase. And Potomac over there is a little more of a suburb of it, which is a very rich area. Then we come up 270, and a little off that is Rockville, which is the center of government and the center of the county in general. It has the county council, it has the board of education, it has the county executive, it has a lot of the resources that you want to find are in there. Then up here we have Gaithersburg, Germantown. Somewhere over here is Montgomery Village. That's a very big area, just about as big as Rockville and Bethesda. It's going to have, we'll get into this in a minute, but it's going to have more lower income people. It's further out from the city. Obviously, the further you get from the city, the cheaper things are. Out here is Poolesville. There's a very rural area outside of Poolesville itself. Is a very small, rich community. But outside of this is mostly farmland. So across the whole top of the county here is an agricultural reserve where you're not allowed to develop in the same way. It's all reserved for farmland with a couple exceptions. And then the last thing up the 270 corridor is Clarksburg, which is still another fairly rich suburban community. Then up here is Damascus, which is the most conservative area of the county. Those are the only places in the county where anybody votes Republican. When you break down the voter map, we have precincts, which are the places you go to vote. And Damascus is the only place in the county where those ever vote Republican. Everywhere else is Democrat. Then down here, this is, again, a lot of empty space. We call this more like mid-county. And then here is East County, down into a lot lower income districts, a lot more diverse, a lot more minorities presence here. Wheaton, and Aspen Hills somewhere in here. That's a very Hispanic area. We've got Silver Spring. And honestly, all of this is more or less Silver Spring. And then we've got a very rich community called Tacoma Park down here. That's the general layout of the county. Again, here's it broken down by council district. And this map is going to change soon. We'll get more into that in the county council video. But so we've got, the rich South County here, and in the West County is also pretty rich. The District 2 is going to be a lot of Up County. District 3 is the center of Gaithersburg and Rockville, which are probably the two biggest cities in the county. Silver Spring and Bethesda are also very big. And it's, again, a lot of rural areas. We get down here, it's more, more diverse, more minorities, more Hispanic presence. And then along here is the East County, which is the poorest part of the state. It's the poorest part of the county, rather. It's a very rich county still in the state. A lot more minorities in here. They need a lot more resources than they have access to. And so here's some maps to look at. So the first one is our population density. And like I said, the rural areas up here, not that many people. When we get down in here, Germantown, Gaithersburg, you can see down into, Silver Spring areas and Aspen Hill and, Bethesda. There's a lot more people living down there. So rural areas more up here, urban areas, suburban areas more down here. And then over here, the blue dots are all like multifamily housing. So, we're missing a lot of, mid-level housing, but it's a lot of high rises, a few townhomes, not much else besides that, which is a crisis. And then the yellow dots, those are single family housing. So as you can see along metro lines and along the highways, there's a lot more of the multifamily housing. And then as you get out more into more ruralish, suburban, more areas, it's a lot more single family housing. It's a lot of those suburban neighborhoods. And then, so starting here, we're going to look at, what's our predominant racial or ethnic group. So, around the edges, the more rural areas, the more rich areas down here in Bethesda, we're predominantly white, all along the center of the county. And as we get down in this minority area, there is no predominant, nobody's over 50% of the population for most of here. And again, as we look at our immigrants here, again, it's Gaithersburg, Germantown's a big area for that. And then, East County down over here is another big area for that. So here's our look now at, by census tract, it's our percentage of the population that is different races. And so, starting here with white people tend to be higher income. Unfortunately, that just is how things have shaken out. We're not better than that, even though Montgomery County is progressive in some ways. So again, down here in Bethesda is very rich. Out there in Poolesville is very rich, and very white rather. And then now here in the middle of the county, that's Gaithersburg there, Rockville down here, East County. It's a lot fewer white people. And then we go over and look at where the black people are hanging out. So up here at Gaithersburg, there's more of them, especially East County is a lot. And then Hispanic, again, up in Gaithersburg. And then this is, I believe, Wheaton, Aspen Hill type area is a big hotspot there. And then our Asian population, which again is more higher income, is hanging out more in the West County. In Montgomery County Public Schools, we actually group our white and Asian students together because they tend to be higher income and have general future, outcomes together. Obviously, a white student's not going to have the same lived experience as an Asian student, but economically speaking, in this county, they tend to be somewhat similar. And now here's our look at our income. So like I said, it's our white areas and it's our rich areas down here in Bethesda, out getting into West County, out towards Poolesville. Again, up here in the Mid County, which is also more rural areas, but somewhat upscale neighborhoods in there to an extent. And then our education map parallels that a lot with, Bethesda and West County is, again, the places where people are going to have their graduate and professional degrees. Our college grads are people with a lot of education. It takes a lot of money. Montgomery County is very rich, which we'll get into when we look at our comparison across Maryland. But yeah, again, the more education you have, the more income you're going to have, the more money you're going to have, and the more you're going to move into these upscale neighborhoods down in Bethesda and Potomac. Okay, so now the state of Maryland as a whole. So I wanted to start by grouping Maryland into regions. These are not official regions, but it's how I group it in my head. So first, these three counties are very rural. And that's our western panhandle. It sticks out over, this is West Virginia and Virginia down here. And then across here, it's hard to say for some of these counties because Frederick is more divided than this. The southern half of Baltimore is more divided than this. But generally, these are like ex-urban counties, which are halfway in between rural and suburban urban. There's people, but there's fewer people, and they're driving further distances to get to work. Then here in the center of the state, Montgomery, Howard, Baltimore City, the south half of Baltimore County, Anne Arundel, Prince George's. That's the DC Baltimore metro area. That's a very rich area. That's where most of the people live. That's where most of the educated people go. That's where, the population density is higher, the money is higher. It's a very different life. And then down here is South Maryland, which again, Charles and Calvert are still kind of DC suburbs. Calvert might be almost Baltimore, Annapolis. And then St. Mary's is more rural, but that's Southern Maryland there. Then this whole thing is the Eastern Shore. But I wanted to divide it. So this is the Eastern Shore, and then this is the more tourism areas for Ocean City over here, which is, our beach town, which is getting a lot of tourism. And again, this is going to be more rural areas. This is going to be more rural areas. With rural voters, you get more conservatism down in here in the center, where there's a lot more people and it's a lot more urban, suburban areas. You're going to have a lot more liberal or leftist type voters. And then I broke down the counties by what type of county they are. So all our red counties here out west and mostly along the Eastern Shore and St. Mary's are rural counties, completely rural counties. It's a lot more, farming type stuff or, work like that. And our yellow counties are ex-urban. So Frederick will go to both Baltimore and DC. Carroll's going to Baltimore. Hartford's coming to Baltimore. Charles and Calvert are both coming to DC. Calvert might also come up somewhere in here. Queen Anne's County actually counts because we have our Bay Bridge runs from Anne Arundel County to Queen Anne's County. That's our bridge across this Chesapeake Bay here, which means that Queen Anne's County functions differently. It's higher income and it's somewhat unique from the rest of the Eastern Shore. And then again, down here is our weird tourism Ocean City County. So they're still quite rural, but they do function somewhat differently. And so here's a look at our first. So by population. So again, rural areas out here. Then as we get closer into the cities, there's more and more people. Montgomery County is the biggest county by population in the state. It's over 1 million people here. You can see here in the center of the state, it's more people. Our ex-urban counties, still come somewhat higher. Rural areas, again, are rural and so don't have that many people. Here's a look at the population density. With, again, our rural areas out here and on the eastern shore have very few people. You get in towards the center of the state, and our suburban areas, then there's a lot more people, per square mile. And obviously Baltimore City, being a city, is incredibly densely packed. It is stuffed with people. But that changes over time. And so here's a look at how our counties are changing. So our ex-urban counties, Frederick and Charles, they're growing the most, along with Howard, which is kind of in the null space between Baltimore and DC. And then, out in the eastern shores to an extent, and out west to an extent, we're losing people. Baltimore City is also losing people, but the county around it is growing. So there's less of a trend here to see in general. But I just thought that was interesting data from 2010 to 2019 of how the population has shifted, percentage wise. And then this was a lot of what I used to make my readings on, what's ex-urban versus suburban versus urban. Your average commute. So out in our rural communities, people don't live that far from their place of work. And so they don't have to travel too far. But then, if you live way out from the city, you have to travel super far. If you're, more suburban, in these type of areas, then you're going to have, a fairly long commute. But I just think it's interesting to look at how far do people go to work? Because it gives you an insight into, either how bad's the traffic where they work, or how far do they live from their place of work. So in terms of how much money counties have, so again, our rural counties, they have less money. So the Eastern Shore is not rich. The Western Maryland is not rich. You get in towards the center of the county. Now we're seeing more money spent. Obviously Montgomery County is crazy. Prince George's County is almost as crazy, because these are the two biggest counties in the state. And so we're spending a lot of money in here. But as we adjust this for population, because obviously not all counties are the same population. Yes, the rural counties are not doing as well as Montgomery and Prince George's counties are, but a lot of them are not terrible about raising money for their people, especially the ex-urban counties are doing fine. It's interesting because down here in the Eastern Shore, a couple of those counties are really bad at it. And Anne Arundel County, which is fairly liberal and getting more liberal county, and it has Annapolis, which is our state capital. They're actually very bad about providing enough budget for their population. And I'm not 100% sure why that is. My theory is it comes from their history of they were a conservative county up until the past 10 years or so. And so people wanted to pay less in taxes. But I'm not 100% sure that's the reason. That would just be my guess. So looking more at, how much does it cost to live and how much money do people have? Again, our rural areas, there's not as much income coming in. You get in more toward the center of the state, there's a lot more income there. But that doesn't really mean as much until we look at how much it costs to live there. And so it's very cheap to live in rural places. Then you get more into the center of the state and it's more expensive. And then Montgomery and Howard County are almost prohibitively expensive to live in. It's worth noting that Maryland's cost of living index is significantly higher than the national average in general, because we don't have as much rural area. We have a lot of rural counties. The majority of our counties are, rural ex-urban counties, but the population is centered around the more expensive parts to live. And so that's weighted in there. And so if we take our ratio of annual income to cost of living, which will give you more of a sense of, how much money flexibility people have. Again, it's not ideal out in rural areas. It's actually ex-urban counties tend to be better than our more suburban counties in terms of how much financial flexibility you have. And then Frederick County, interestingly enough, is the most financially flexible by this calculation in the state. And then we want to look at our poverty rates, which are bad. Baltimore's city itself is very bad about poverty because it is an inner city, very big minority population there. The state treats it very, very poorly. There's specific provisions in the Constitution that limit what we can do to Baltimore. Somerset County down here is also very poor. And then again, more poverty along the Eastern Shore, more poverty out west. The closer you get into the cities, the less poverty there is. It's sad to say it, but that's the case, and that's the case all over the country. And then I think this is my last slide. So I got, we're going to look at the percentage of the population that identifies as white. So here in Baltimore City, Prince George's County, and Charles County, those are our majority minority counties. And then, across the center of the state here, we're still pretty diverse. Somerset's also pretty diverse. And then as you get out, further out into the exurbs, it's less diverse. And then the Eastern Shore and out west are very, very white counties. And then we'll look at our median age. People are younger, in the center of the state. Again, especially along the Eastern Shore, people are very, very old. That's more of a retirement place. The median age in Talbot and Worcester, that's over 50, which is very, very old, because some closer in here, it's 30, 35. And then again, the education, it's in the center of the state where it costs more to live, where you're going to make more income because, your college degree gets you further places. Again, out in the rural areas, you either don't have access to that education or you don't feel you need it as much. And so the people don't have it as much. So here's the sources that I generally use to get that information, which is mostly just scraped off the Census Bureau's website. I hope you enjoyed. If you have questions, you can email me at davetalkslocalpolitics@gmail.com. I will try to get back to you if I can. If you have questions, please reach out. Please let me know. Other than that, please continue on down in this video. We're going to unpack the Maryland legislature, the Maryland executive, the Maryland judiciary, a couple other functions of the Maryland government. We're going to unpack the Montgomery County Council, the Montgomery County executive, and the Montgomery County Public Schools Board of Education. So there's a lot going on in this video series. So please continue on this playlist. Thank you all a lot for watching. Hope you're having a great day.